This episode of the Bonsai Time Podcast is sponsored by the Grow Clothing Company.
Hey, all you Bonsai Time Podcast listeners, and those people who just stumbled across this awesome podcast. Have you struggled to find the right gift for the bonsai or plant enthusiast in your life? I know I have. That is why I choose Grow Clothing Company. They have all the cool designs for you. So whether you're a bonsai amateur, master, or somewhere in between, or you're just a plant obsessed, or just starting out, there are designs for you and everyone, and I mean everyone. Use the links in the show notes to find the right shirt for you and your friends. Bonsai Time Podcast listeners will receive a 10% discount. Use the code Bonsai Time in all capitals at checkout to receive yours. Offer valid now until February 1st, 2024. Find them on Facebook, Instagram, or on their website. The Grow family can't wait to see you.
Shop today at growclothingco.myshopify.com. That's growclothingco, all one word, .myshopify.com, or find them in our show notes.
Go.
Now, back to the Bonsai Time Podcast.
Hey, listener. This is the Bonsai Time Podcast coming at you. I want to say happy holidays, and this is a special episode coming from all of us. Myself, Ryan, Kelly, our new member of the Bonsai Time team, and our wonderful guest, the infamous Julian Tsai.
Hello.
Hey Ryan.
Yeah.
Jingle bells.
Oh,
Nice.
wait, I gotta show Ryan. I was gonna wear this, but it's too hot here. It's
Yeah,
an
that's a
ugly...
California problem.
I was like, what's that like? The high at 35 today.
Oh, but I wore something else.
Ohio State.
Oh, nice.
I was just like, what? She drank the water. She's never changed. What are you wearing, Julian?
Just a green long sleeve, nothing fancy.
Okay, gotcha.
That's solid.
I'm not actually. I don't have any Christmas sweaters. Not festive enough.
You can have this one.
So no,
Someone gave
Yeah.
this to me
Yeah.
yesterday at the BICON party.
no.
I bought my first bonsai related Christmas sweater this year.
Mhm.
I'm going to Oregon to visit family, and I was like, you know what? Why not? It's like $13 on Amazon. I was like, sure, let's do it. It's gonna be shipped there, so I don't have to pay for tax. But it's
Mhm.
kind of weird. I don't do the same
nice.
thing.
No
It's like,
tax.
I know. I was like, man, I missed
Yeah.
that. And a bottle return, get money back for your cans.
Can we see your sweater?
Yeah, so this
The
was
jingle-
a Secret Santa gift someone got me.
Taco,
that's pretty
taco
cool.
shells?
Jingle bells, taco shells.
Yeah.
And
Taco
I guess it's
Bell.
Taco
Nice.
Bell. I don't know if Taco
Yeah.
Bell sold it or someone just made it, but yeah.
Probably a trademark infringement there, maybe one or two of them. So it's hot out there in California, right?
Yeah, it's
Is
pretty
it right
warm.
now?
Yeah,
Are you
60 right
getting
now.
that atmospheric river
Yeah.
that Seattle's getting, all that rain?
In Oregon, yeah.
uh-huh.
No rain.
Yeah. Supposed to be El Nino year, so they will maybe have a lot of rain later. I don't know, but
Mm.
Maybe.
yeah.
Didn't y'all get snow last year too?
Yeah, last year was pretty ridiculous. A bunch
That's
of
a trip.
rain, and yeah, even in like our local, I mean, our higher elevations, the local mountains always get snow, but it
Right.
was like very substantial snow, like 10, 15 plus feet of snow, like in our local mountains. That's like not normal for our area.
So then all the snow parks and stuff were able to stay open longer then too, right?
Yeah, the resorts, yeah.
That's good for economy anyways.
Yeah.
Man, my brother lives in Southeast Arizona and they just got their first snowfall on Thanksgiving. He said it was like almost a foot. I was like, cool. Keep
Sounds
that
like a lot for
going.
Arizona.
Yeah.
But he's in Southeast, so it's like closer to the border.
I
Okay.
So
see.
it's like super cold and arid and like just flash flooding all the time because it's so flat clay. He's like, look at
Mhm.
this. It was like, oh wow.
Yeah.
So Ryan, you brought us all here today.
Yes, I did. I guess I organized this thing. So yeah, so I just put the link to the outline in the chat, and we can do this a couple ways just to give you an idea of what I had in mind. I kind of wanted an excuse to look into the history of Christmas on a deeper level, and especially like all the different types of trees and plants that play a role in that history. So that's I've kind of listed some of those items that are in the Christmas history and taken some quotes and paraphrased here or there from articles online, so that we could discuss, like, we could all learn together about this history, share it with the listeners. And then at the end of each section, I put a list of like what species are used for that purpose. And then at the overall end, I was hoping that we could do like a Christmas tree species draft for their abilities for bonsai. So I've got the list of species, and we each go around picking which ones might be our favorite. And then, or I'll explain that one more when we get there. I don't want to get too far ahead of us. But the reason I'm explaining all of this is to say we will need to follow along with the draft somehow, or this outline. So I could share my screen, or you all could have it individually on your computers. What do you prefer?
I've got it opened up on my computer.
Yeah,
What do you
I
guys
have
want
it
to do?
open.
Okay, that's fine.
Actually,
That's
do
easy.
you mind if you can like share your screen?
Yeah,
And so I can just make sure I'm like on the same track of what you're looking at.
Sure.
If that's all right.
Julian,
Yeah.
this is the first time I've ever done this. This is
we've never
Ryan's
done something like
awesome,
this,
cool
so-
idea. I was like, let's do it, man.
Yeah.
Thank you for being the guinea pig.
Yeah, and we wanted to
Ah.
have you on, Julian, because this way, people already know you because we had you were my
Right.
first guest on this
Yeah,
podcast
yeah.
way back in 2000.
Yeah, that was
So-
a while ago. Yeah.
Yeah, people know some of your story already.
How has your
Yes.
life changed since you last talked to Ryan?
Yeah, so we had that first podcast probably end of 2019, I think, or right at the start of 2020. It's
Yeah.
like this was like right before COVID hit, I think.
Mhm.
And so yeah, I mean a lot is changed in that time span. Initially, when you first had me on the podcast, right, I just left Japan. And I was kind of pretty, I say like undecided to pursue bonsai necessarily as a profession. There's like a variety of reasons, and then of course then the pandemic hit, which was then like, I mean, to even travel or work, right? That was not even possible. And so kind of my whole bonsai profession goals just went on hiatus. And initially I fell back on my degree, I guess. So I was working in San Diego. We have all these like medical device companies there. So we were making like glucose products and doing kind of research related to that. And so I was down there for like 2 or 3 years over the pandemic. And then I was still doing kind of bonsai on the side. And then over that time, because I could even feel for myself, even though I was in Japan 2 years and like can improve and learn a lot in that time span, like the scope of knowledge is like much bigger, like beyond that. And so kind of over the whole COVID period when I was working, I studied under like 2 bonsai professionals just to fill in the gaps of what I felt would be better before I try to do bonsai professionally. So I was kind of regularly going to Peter T's place like almost every month. And then there was another local professional who also apprenticed in Japan, is very good, John Wong. Maybe not as many people know him because he doesn't really do any of the traveling stuff. He's just only working for his private clients, but another very skilled professional. And so I kind of did that over the 2-3 years when I was working. And then last year, or like a year and a half ago, I was at that current job and it was like a startup and we had all these like super crazy like work hours and the environment was like really stressful. It's like my bosses all the time were just like cursing at each other. It's like fights every day. So people were really stressed out. And I was working like, it could be like 60, 80-hour weeks. And so I was like really tired and trying to do bonsai at the same time. And at that time, I decided it's like I have to actually choose. It's not like possible to do it both. And I'm like really grateful that I had like, I guess, good professional mentors like Peter and John and some of my friends who kind of really encouraged me to do bonsai professionally. And so I gave myself like a year trial run where I said I would only do bonsai for my income for one full year. It's just as a proof of concept, just to prove to myself if it's like possible or not. And well, it's been like a year and a half, right? So at least I decided I could do it. And fortunately the work has been enough, and grateful to like my customers and clients who support me. But yeah, but that's where I'm at right now. So living the full-time bonsai professional life, and it's good and bad aspects, right?
So is it safe to say you're tired of top ramen and mac and cheese and hot dogs?
It's so yeah, I mean, it's definitely the start, right? It's like a struggle. I'm like, won't deny that. And it's the traveling aspect can be like pretty hard. And especially I don't really have a place or nursery yet, which is like a longer term goal to build towards. But all in all, like I'm really not doing like that bad. And I'm able to work like basically full time, right? Doing bonsai. So my schedule is more or less fully booked. And so it's for sure it's hard. But I'm definitely grateful and appreciative of where I'm at right now. And so I can't complain too much.
That's good that you're saying your schedule is pretty much fully booked now. So how long do you think it took, like once you made that step to the point where your schedule was full? Was there a period where you weren't sure if that was the right decision or?
Right. So I left my last job in like, was it 2022 in it was like the summer of, or no, that was 2021 because it's 2023 now, right? Okay. So it was like the summer of that year. And then I think I had like when I left, I had like two bonsai jobs booked on my calendar for like 3 months, right? Just like two random weekend jobs. And so I was like really stressing out in the beginning because I was like, well, at least I'll start off in this one gig. I sold a bunch of trees. And then it was kind of, I just totally winged it in the beginning, that I just advertised and put myself out there. And then I kind of just have like the belief that, if you treat people well, of course your work matters, right? The quality and doing good job for people, then you'll just, right, you can build momentum off of that. And so I'd say the first 3-4 months definitely was like hard. It's like huge, I guess, income loss basically for like 3-4 months. And then and I think 3-4 months in, I started establishing like study groups. And initially the study groups were like a total flop, right? I tried so many different formats. I didn't know how many times people wanted to meet a year, the duration of the groups, and basically how much should I charge, which relates to how many people are there and how long it is. And so I lost a lot of money doing those in the beginning, just in like my time and travel. And so it took me like a good 4 or 5 months to kind of really narrow those down, figure out a method that works and what people want. And so I'd say probably like 5 months in, it started to like stabilize. And then I would say majority of my work is maybe like 60% from like referrals and word of mouth. And the other is just like social media. People find my work and contact me. And then so in that sense, which is good. I'm glad I don't have to be fully reliant on like social media. But I was able to just kind of through just like treating people well and doing good work. And then kind of word of mouth, you get more references and you start building your reputation that way. And so in some sense, I was like very fortunate and lucky that in the scheme of things, like half a year is not really that long to kind of stabilize your work. So some of it is just like luck but around that time frame, right, it started to settle in. And I think every month thereafter, it's like the work started becoming like more consistent and getting more jobs in. And then so now I feel I don't want to say I'm like not stressed because there's like a lot of stuff going on, but it's like sustainable at least for now. So
the good stress.
yeah, right. Yeah.
Well, that's good to hear that it's all working out so well so far.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Should we dive into the next area of discussion then?
Yeah, let's do it.
So here, the first area that I wanted us to talk about is more related to the season. So I wanted us to discuss what can you do in the bonsai world over winter. And I was hoping maybe each of us, I have three kind of general categories here, and I was hoping each of us, maybe Kevin, Kelly, and Julian, something in that order, if you could brainstorm for your item, your category,
Hmm.
what types of things that you could do over winter would fall into that category, and then everybody else can chime in if they have other ideas too.
What are the categories? Can you list them out for us?
Oh, yes. Well, you could do that while you're presenting it. But so the first category is hands-on tree work. This may vary greatly by where you are in the country. How cold is it?
Climate.
Yeah. And then the next one is preparing for spring. That one's kind of universal. And the last one is education, organizing, planning, and other.
Hmm.
So, Kevin, are you okay with doing the hands-on tree work from the Ohio perspective?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm like, ooh, that's gonna be different from everywhere you go.
Yeah.
From the Ohio perspective, that sounds funny to say. Um, if you're in Ohio or the Midwest or somewhere really cold, get a cold frame greenhouse, block the wind. You can get away with more. Small little ground heater. Hands-on tree work is limited to what, like I just said, your capacity is to protect your trees in winter. From my experience, I have a landlord that is just as crazy as I am. He let me build a full-on, fully installed greenhouse cold frame that we use for drying garlic and starting tomato starts in summer. So it's a recirculated, multi-use storage, everything, seasonally dependent. The tree work I can get away with if you're in the Midwest, like I said, depending on your seasonality of cold front going in really hard. Fall into about this time, you can still do some styling of some junipers, some cutbacks on some deciduous work, some implementing some initial styling on some of that too. As I know, Julian, you've done a lot of talking about that. And I saw your article just published in the ABS journal. That was a really good article.
Thank you.
Go on that. Do more of that, please. That was a great read. If anybody hasn't read it yet, you should check it out. Yeah, that's basically it, and then just really doing the the Mother Mary, whatever you call it, the prayers of the gods of bonsai trees that they all survive the cold front and cold snaps and freeze thaw cycles that we get out here. How about you, Ryan? You just opened up your nursery. What are you thinking?
Yeah, so I don't know if what I do in winter is necessarily something I would recommend to everybody, but to some extent I do it because I have a lot of trees. So for example, I was just at a holiday sale yesterday. I was pruning and wiring trees all day. And these are outdoor species pretty much. So I have noticed that if I'm wiring deciduous, especially later in the fall, like November, December, I'm more likely to get some dieback. Like if before maybe your loss of branches is like less than 5%, maybe I might get 10 to 15% nowadays, or in the past couple of years anyways. So I think that is partially because I do not have a cold frame like Kevin does.
Not yet.
So I do totally low-tech winter. I'm a renter also. And miraculously, many of my trees survive. So again, don't do this on your most valuable tree, but if you just need to get your hands dirty, get that itch scratched a little bit, you could do that. And I'm also propagating a lot of tropicals, so I get the itch scratched that way. So I've always got these trays, striking new cuttings and separating them into individual pots, cycling through, pushing more out to new holiday sales, general public sales. So that's another thing that you can do is indoor tropical work, especially if you have a grow light. They respond okay.
All right, it sounds like you got a lot of itchy spots, man. Maybe you should get that checked out.
Yeah, maybe I need some cream for that instead of bonsai. I don't know.
What's it like in California? What's the hands-on tree work for this time of season? I mean, mind you, it's hot compared to the 35 degrees we had today.
Yeah, asking me or Kelly?
Both of you. Whoever wants to go first.
You go first, Kelly.
I don't think there's anything different that I'm doing with my trees. They're all outside. I water them the same. The leaves haven't fallen off. I know this might be a silly question. So when you say cold frame, is that like a hoop house? I don't really know.
No, that's not silly. That's a very good question, actually. I take it in part because I was just in a greenhouse class of constructing and things in that way. So part of the vernacular. Yeah, cold frame, if you think of like a hoop house, is a good example. A cold frame is pretty much a structure that is enclosed most of the time, and you generally may have no heat or minimal heat as just basically like think of a small heater you put in the garage by your feet, not to get cold or something that way. A greenhouse generally constitutes having a full-time heat and fan escape with air and humidity control and stuff. Again, we're getting into the logistics and semantics of all the things, but cold frame is just basically a structure that's sitting by itself. If you think of a shed, that's a good way to put it, but more along the lines of having like a polythene covering, like a white UV resistant covering to where sunlight comes in, but doesn't go through and bake your plants. It heats it up sometimes, but there's the cold frame, you have a lot of heat loss and a lot of cold entry. So it's not a lot of buffer. Does that make sense?
So it just basically shields it from the wind.
Exactly.
And the sun.
Yeah.
A little
Yeah.
bit.
Simplified. Thank you for simplifying.
And Kevin, yours is a little fancy. You have a heater on a timer so that it pretty much stays right above freezing, right?
Yeah. So I have a digital thermostat with a physical thermostat that's hanging that reads the air temperature in there, and I don't let it get below 32, but I have it shut off the heat at about 35 to 36. And I also have an exhaust fan that I've put into a window that I manually crank on. So I check on it. And yes, I do wake up in the middle of the morning to like early AM when it's like 20 degrees out, just to kind of kick out some of that humidity, because that humidity can cause some problems with pathogens and other diseases spreading around too. It's a whole run around circus sometimes because my wife's like, really? You're going outside right now? It's snowing. It's all right. Ryan, how many trees do you have now, though?
I'd never count. People ask me this all the time. I never count. I don't know the answer. I don't want to know the answer.
I know it's too many because I helped you move.
Yeah, it is a lot. As soon as I count, people are going to say it's too many.
Julian, what's your hands-on tree work right now? What do you do?
Yeah, so like in Southern California, we're really mild, right? I mean, it's just barely temperate enough that deciduous trees do go dormant. But right, leaves drop late, and like right, our daytime temperatures is still like in the 70s right now, like pretty crazy. And but we are getting to like in the 40s at night. So just enough the trees can start to fall asleep. Because the temperatures are so mild, though, technically in December, you can start repotting because you don't have to worry about this overwinter protection. But generally, I recommend to people that if you are doing these kind of fall, early winter period repottings in a mild-ish climate, it shouldn't be anything very severe and heavy, right? So you're not doing your full blow-on repottings, cutting off all the roots, because in the fall time, and then I don't know if you guys notice this in your areas, but if you kind of observe the trees, especially the buds they set for next year, generally around this fall and winter period, all these buds start to swell because it's just like the accumulation of starches and energies for next year. And so if your work is too aggressive and you interrupt that like storage of energy, then your tree is going to flush out weaker in the springtime. And so kind of with that caveat, I mean, you can do a lot. And then right at this time period, we can do wiring, deciduous stuff. You can cut as the leaves fall down. And so we're pretty flexible in the sense because we don't have to worry about like hard freezing temperatures. At the most, maybe occasionally you can get a few nights of freezing, but nothing significant. And right, so that's like a huge difference compared to a more like temperate climate. But so yeah, I mean, actually quite a lot we can do right now. It's still a pretty busy month in that sense.
Have you seen the ability to combat the weak push out for spring with fertilizing in fall and then having that
Yes,
set?
yeah.
ahead of the
Definitely
repot?
recommend fertilizing in fall is a great idea because when the temperatures start to taper off from summertime, I mean, trees is not necessarily putting on any more foliar growth, but the roots is definitely active, and in some species and cases, I would say it's more active than midsummer, right? They can still suck a lot of water and transport nutrients. So it's actually a perfect practice to fertilize your trees in fall. And so I'll change out all my fertilizer in the fall time, up my kind of liquid foliar applications, and then the response is always like evident. You can see the buds mature better, overall health of the tree stronger, and then I know going into next year, right, the tree's going to grow strong in the spring. Or say knowingly on a tree that I need to like really work the roots, right, I can try to pump as much energy in the tree in this fall period before we undertake some stressful work, so it has kind of more reserves to tolerate that.
Hmm.
Okay. And just to follow up on that, you're talking about for a mild repot, you can do it in December, which is kind of just after the leaves fall off.
Yeah, so
When,
like
oh, go ahead.
go ahead. Okay. Yeah, I mean, so like on my maples, they're like just like right now, right? They're falling
Okay.
off, right?
Yeah.
It's like
Not
Mind
right,
blown.
they're
Mind blown.
yeah, they're
yeah,
just like
mid-December-ish.
it's just basically, I mean at this point they're all pretty much almost all off, or they're just kind of I can just cut them off. They're barely clinging on.
Hmm.
And sorry, what's the question
Oh,
for
well, I
this
didn't quite
again?
get to the question, but
Okay.
so if that's your mild repot scenarios, like around December. So when do
Yeah,
they wake
yeah.
up? Is it like, and then that would be the more ideal time for more severe repot in your
Yeah.
area.
So it's like our spring equivalent in, say, Southern California tends to be for deciduous, right? If you're waiting for that bud swell period, tends to be end of January, early February is pretty safe. And so on average, it's like that in SoCal, right? If we went up a bit north, either through the Central Valley or Sacramento, then it does start shifting, say about a month later, which is more normal around March to April. But in the more mild areas, say even like San Francisco, which is definitely cooler than where we are at, but they share similar bottom temperatures to Southern California. And I think they have pretty early spring as well. So yeah, around February, early February is a ballpark, right? A lot of species start to wake up around that time period.
Okay, good to know. One more idea for you, Kevin, on hands-on tree work. So I'm sure everybody here has probably heard of David Crust. He's in Minnesota, and he shares a lot of great pictures on his social media. And so over winter, you can often find him doing unwiring of his trees, maybe some light pruning of the fine foliage, and then some fine tweaking on the wiring of the fine foliage. So that, and he's in a very cold environment, much even more colder than Ohio. But again, he does have some kind of a cold frame to protect his trees from the worst of his winter up there. So I think a general rule of thumb could be the more cold your winter, the more conservative you should be. Does that seem reasonable?
Yeah.
I'll just
Yeah.
say if you live in a cold climate like New England or the Midwest, you got to really want to do bonsai because spring preparation, I sit in my basement in my place where I'm at now, and I'll sift soil, and it's like 40 degrees in there.
Yeah.
And it's like, I love what I'm doing. I love what I'm doing. And then when we're potting in March, it's still maybe 30 below. So we have a huge heater in the greenhouse. And it's like, I can't feel my toes, but my fingers are wet and cold too. So, it's cool. I don't know.
Hey, Kevin.
Yeah.
How do you water if it's like 28 degrees in your cold frame?
That's a great question. So with my cold frame, it does a different climatized environment of its own little sector. If you think of like a house, right? Small little house. I generally will water maybe once or twice a week, depending on how much sunshine there is or how hot it is outside. If we get a good amount of snow, which could be a foot, I'll pile that up on my trees on there. That way it just dissolves and I don't have to worry about watering too much. If we don't get a lot of snow, which we might not get this year, maybe a little bit, but not like normal. I generally water probably once a week because the heat insulates itself in there so much. But Ryan will probably do it different because he's able to get more of that natural moisture through outside. The thing that I run into, and people I've talked to that have houses, if you will, or like cold frame, greenhouse, whatever you want to call it, they water too much and you get root rot, and you don't know about it until you get to spring.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a soppy mess. Like today, I didn't expect it to rain yesterday. It rained all day, and I left 2 trees out because I'm like, oh, they're fine. We were up to 60 degrees almost today and yesterday. Now we're going into yesterday was 6, today was 35. So what a dip for the high. I didn't expect it to rain like I was saying. And so now that when I was trying to dry out, because it said it was supposed to be sunny, but Ohio, I swear the weather people just flip a coin. It's like, yeah, it looks good. It got even more wet. So now I'm having to literally take it out and kind of squeeze it out like a sponge because it's so compacted already. It's fine. But I'm just like, oh, and it's a little Engelmann Yamadori spruce from Rainy Night I got at Nature's Way Nursery at Jim Doyle. And I was like, God, it's a test of patience. And I had to learn that watering system when I came out here, because when I was doing it in Oregon, it was a lot more available to just leave them outside. Ryan, I don't want to say I taught you, but I think I gave you a lot of heads up of like, be careful.
Yeah. And I did learn the hard way some because I didn't respect winter enough when I first came here. I was like, oh yeah, I came from Seattle, it's like I thought the trees here would just be ready for winter, they're already here, especially digging like native trees or trees from people's landscapes. I thought that they would be able to handle more, but you still want to be a little bit careful just in general about all things winter and not overwatering, not underwatering, all these things.
Some things to throw on too. Some people will do what's called a heat bed. I did an experiment a couple of years ago with digging. We have a lot of yardadori out here, not so much of the crazy cool yamadori you guys have, the old California junipers and stuff, but I have a really huge bird's nest spruce, and I dug it out. Well, I think Ryan helped me put it in pumice about a year ago, probably now, and it was like in October. So I never dug in October. Being out here, I always dig in early spring. And I made a heat bed, and it's going bonkers. It's loving it. I'm not doing a heat bed this year because I had roots growing out into the ground of my grow box this year, so I figured I'm fine. It's just being aware of the temperatures is going to be the biggest indication. Like Ryan has to do a little different because he's outside.
Mm-hmm. The craziest thing about that tree, Kevin, that I remember is, I mean, it had a great trunk. I'm not talking about that. The craziest thing was the roots. It had this thick wad of like many fibrous spaghetti like roots.
Yeah.
It was like a whole bundle of them, and they were very long, and we just kind of folded it into that wooden pot.
Yeah.
And
the thing was
pretty much full of those already.
Yeah, and the thing was too is that when I dug it out, it was probably only about a 2-inch spread of roots in the ground. I could have probably I was almost able to just pick it up out of the ground by myself without any utensils of tools or shovels or anything. But I cautioned that on myself. I was like, hey, slow down, be mindful of the heart in this area, this next year I'm going to try to see if I can get some preliminary styling on it and see what happens. So it's going to be it's a big one. I think it's like 3 feet across by like 2.5 feet wide and like 3 feet high. It's pretty big. It's heavy.
Anyways, that's a fun Yamadori tangent.
Yeah.
Kelly, would you like to take over the spring preparation? What kinds of things might you think about at this time of year to get ready for spring when everything's waking up?
So last year I learned the hard way. You better sift your soil a month or two before, because if you're doing it like the month where you're trying to repot everything, it's backbreaking work, and you're just up all night sifting.
Are you wearing a mask when you're sifting? I always ask.
No.
You should be wearing a mask. You must wear a mask.
I will now. So next week, I'm going to bring my lava, pumice, and akadama to one of the club members' homes because he has like a big sifter thing where it makes it easier. So I'm going to sift some of mine, sift some of his, and that way I just have my bags ready and don't have to worry. Probably going to build some more wooden grow boxes. I can't think of anything else that I would do to prepare other than maybe list out the trees I want to repot and then the ones I'm just going to leave. That way I kind of know which ones and I don't have to guess.
What are your indications for your trees that need repotting?
So I'm kind of over the instant bonsai. When I started, I'm like, oh, I just want everything in a bonsai pot so it looks like a nice tree. And I had a discussion with Peter T, just a brief one about instant bonsai and how, I mean, he really doesn't like it, and I get it. I see it now. When I was new, I didn't. So now the ones I'm going to do are probably the old trees I've gotten from older people that can no longer take care of their trees. And I got them in summer. So I think I have like 10 of them. And they're really in need of a good repotting. We kind of split potted some of them, but I think they really need to be repotted in better soil because it's like really hard. The roots are all gnarly. Probably have to figure out what to do with that. Some of them should have roots that should have grown out of the pot because they were on the ground, but I don't know, for 15 years it didn't do that. So we're kind of wondering what's underneath in the soil. So I think definitely those, and I've ground layered. Is that what it's called? A couple of things. I kind of want to see if I can split those apart and see what happens. That's probably it for me, and maybe some wiring and cutting, but I'm still learning how to wire better.
Did you already get all the pots that you want for those trees, or are you like kind of looking now for the pots?
So I talked to Kevin before the meeting, and we were talking about hoarding or like, you know, just constantly trying to look for like get pots. So I have a lot of pots, an insane amount. And I used to think I'm never going to be one of those people. I don't know why these guys go to shows and they're just buying pots they'll never use. So now I have a lot just because I was able to find a lot of good deals. And I make my own. So I think I don't think I need to look for any pots.
Okay, that's good.
Do you have a lot of different sizes or?
Yeah, so I have some really, really tiny ones, which I don't think I have trees for that unless I want to put a seedling in them. I don't have large, like the really large ones, because I don't have really large trees. And sometimes the pot itself is just too heavy for me to carry. So I'm just probably not going to get pots like that. Like
just for some
Julian sized trees, I probably would not be able to handle.
Save your back.
Just for some perspective, I'm kind of the polar opposite. I wrote a list of all of the trees that I have that could be repotted, and then I measure them to figure out, okay, what size of pot.
This is a PhD, everyone.
And
this
then
is what it does to you.
Tape measure. Like we had some estate sales at the club meeting. So I brought a tape measure and I brought the list. And I was checking off, okay, this one could go with this tree. And so I try to stick with trees that I already know I need pots for.
Or it's what you call a scientist's brain, you know?
Yeah, I might copy you, Ryan.
And resource limited, you know.
I just tag mine with a pencil or like a bright colored tag. Like here, done.
I guesstimate. I'm like, it's maybe this size.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I'm like, I don't remember how big it's supposed to be. So this helps.
So Julian,
I feel like a couple inches too big or too small could make a big difference, you know?
Yeah. Julian, with your spring preparation, are you like hitting the weight room so you have a stronger back going forward for your like
the rock climbing gym? I have seen that.
Rocky montage. You're like, you know, like...
So I like this was even like before bonsai, but I had like kind of tendonitis in one of my hands, and then just like I guess some like bad like posture stuff. And then of course bonsai is like so much physical work, and especially I started doing it full time. Like I think like repotting season last year, I probably repotted like 300 trees. And like a good percentage of those are like really big trees. And it's like literally like backbreaking work, right? I can feel it's like, oh, it's like not good for like a lot of bonsai professionals, they get like arthritis and stuff, and they're like
Mm.
when they start getting older, especially like right now, the generation of bonsai professionals, like say before me, they're like hitting their 40s now, some in their 50s. And yeah, and all the ones that asked Tails, like, yeah, you have to take care of your body, right? Because like otherwise it's your line of work and profession that's like really bad if you get an injury. So yeah, kind of yeah, what Ryan was saying, I started going right to a climbing gym because my thought process was like, oh, if I strengthen my hands, I won't like I'll get less tendonitis, right? Because it'll support like my wrist or joints better or something. And it was kind of like a total like whim. I was like, oh, it's like a gym's close by. Why don't I just do this? But right, it totally worked, right? It's like,
Nice.
and it's like really fun also to go. So I do that pretty regularly now. And just like, I guess keep myself like in good enough shape that at least I just don't injure and hurt myself. But that actually that like matters. And or I'm still, I guess, young enough that I mean, I don't think I don't have to think too deeply about that, but it's like enough that it matters. And
Mhm.
because then if I did actually like say injure myself and then right, I'm on the road and traveling, and it's like if I just stop working, it's like then what, right? That's like
Yeah.
no more money, right, to cover expenses. And so in some sense I have to be more risk preventative, and so actually yeah, that does matter. Don't just like brute force pick up trees and think about how you carry things, and right, don't overstrain your body, and it's definitely safer.
Are you getting any I call it, I have a massage therapy business and a landscape business. Are you doing
Mhm.
any massage or chiropractic or acupuncture or anything?
No, yeah, I don't do any of that, so it's just like
You should start.
yeah, yeah,
It, no,
yeah.
honestly though, it amazes me. The more
Mhm.
people I've talked to who do it professionally as their livelihood,
Yeah.
of course, time is a consideration, right? But
Mhm.
if you're trying to get back to where you were because you didn't take the time in the beginning, it's no, especially with hands,
Yeah, yeah.
it's hardcore.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, definitely you need to treat your body well.
The
Actually,
temple.
that like matters so much. I didn't really think about it until the last like 2 years. Um, yeah, it actually matters a lot.
Now, are you driving all these places you're going to? Are you flying or
I would say mostly driving, especially I'm working in California. Everything out of state or say like beyond Sacramento, like I'll fly to. So
okay?
probably like half and half. Yeah, if it's like groups further out or private clients, then normally right, they'll fly out the professional.
Mhm.
Um, and then if it's more local, I'll drive there. And then kind of beyond a certain distance, I'll charge like a travel fee or something like that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that's awesome. I just picture you just running up these stairs and going.
Yeah, yeah.
I guess one other form of exercise you could do, and maybe this isn't specific to lifting trees
Mhm.
and carving on trees and doing repotting and all that, but you
Yeah.
could do cardio like hiking and everything.
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that for me ties in with I spend some of my winter time scouting for Yamadori.
Hmm.
And yeah, you do need to have strong muscles to dig a tree and carry it back anyway. So
Yeah.
it's admirable that you're doing all this rock climbing.
No. Thanks. Yeah.
So Julian, was there any other ideas on spring preparation?
Um, I mean, yeah, I think we touched on all the important stuff, right? Think about like what do you need to repot, the supplies you need, have everything prepared in advance. You generally you don't want to like scramble, right? So if you prepare everything for yourself in advance, it just makes it easier, less stressful. You're not straining as much. And just be kind of aware of your trees, right? Which trees are growing stronger, which trees aren't as growing as strong, and does that relate, say, to the root situation? And if you have work planned, right, then you need to think about, well, is my tree in the condition in terms of the health and the physical branch structure that I can do the work that I want to do? And if not, are there like steps I should employ this coming growing season, right, to basically adjust your technique or practices as you go? And so, I mean, so like here in like SoCal, or actually a lot of California where it's mild, I mean, we can still do a lot of work in the wintertime, but say in your more temperate, colder climates where your trees are actually just really like, right, things are just asleep, right? Maybe you don't just mess with them after a certain temperature, then that's like for you to plan what's going to happen in the coming season, right? And so I guess having awareness of just your own collection and your state of the trees is just going to make your coming growing season smoother, right? So I would just say, yeah, just always prepare in advance, whether it be soil or maybe you need fungicide supplies, fertilizers, have those all prepared. And so when you need to do something, right, it's just on hand and you can do it easily.
Yeah, a lot of gathering of supplies and thinking in that way. But I also remember, Julian, a while back you wrote an article about maintaining your tools. Is that still
Oh
on
yeah.
your website? Because
Yeah,
that's
yeah, it's
another good
still that's
winter
like my
activity.
that's like, well, that website's still up. That's like my original bonsai blog. Yeah, right. I wrote an article on sharpening concave cutters. And it's funny, I think it's like my second most read blog article that like I don't think there's really even that many online. So when you Google like how do you sharpen concave cutters, probably my article comes up. And right, that's another thing you can do, right? Prepare, clean your tools. So yeah.
That is one thing that there's not a lot of, is there are some very few really well educational how to sharpen tools out there, but you have to search for them, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
As I was cooking when I first got to Ohio, and my chef was like, learn to sharpen your knife because I'm not doing it and nobody else is. I was like, yeah. And then training people that way, same with tools. It's very important.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you sharpen all of your repotting tools every year?
Not every year, it depends. And so yeah, I mean, probably repotting tools not every year, but if it's say like last year where I just had to repot all these big trees, and so like my repotting shear is just getting beat up, yeah, those I definitely sharpened. But say if it's a year I'm not doing such aggressive repotting work, probably the tools will not be as worn out, and so I can go longer between sharpening.
Makes sense.
Okay. So Julian, do you want to take over the next category there? This one may pertain especially for you, the education, organizing, and planning, and other types of things you can do over winter. Pretend you live in Minnesota, basically.
Sure, yeah. And so I guess I can give kind of like two answers from like the perspective of a hobbyist, and then for me like doing this like professionally. But I guess as like a hobbyist, if you're planning like education, organization, then this pertains to maybe like clubs, right? Or different kind of study groups and whatnot. And so actually I do this also, right, as a professional, that I'm planning on what are the study group sessions which pertain to the seasonality of your climate. Like, what can I do at this time of year, right? Is this a period where I can cut the tree, or am I trying to grow something out? Or we have like pines, like decandling techniques, wiring. All of this is very timing specific. And so if whether for yourself, right, or for your group or another person, kind of knowing what is the pertinent timings, and is also relevant to the stage of development, right, you have on your tree. So even we talk about deciduous trees and just the concept of cutting and making branches, right? The timing is really going to depend a lot on terms of how strong the tree is, what you're trying to grow. Are you thickening branching or trying to produce ramification? And so there's so many variables. And so say if you're planning for clubs or club programs, you can consider, well, at this seasonality of the year, this is the work we do most on average, right? And maybe for your own trees or for whomever, you can start planning, okay, in the month of like April, maybe we do repotting or a grafting session. And then maybe in the month of June, we can talk about defoliating or kind of deciduous branch techniques. And so that seasonality is like pretty important. I guess in terms of education, and then this is like relevant to me because at least right now where I am a traveling professional. And so like my, I guess, livelihood is made through like the education of others, where I would say the majority of bonsai practitioners in the US are hobbyists, right? And to kind of contrast that, another, I guess, type of like enthusiast or client, or I like call like patrons, where say you like the art of bonsai, but you're not necessarily as hands-on and practicing it yourself. So I'll say, especially in Japan and Asia, there's more of that type of client where they just want you to work on their trees and they don't really care why, right? Just like make the tree look nice and whatever. But generally, most people in the US are like, oh, why are you doing this? Or why are you doing that? Or I want to do it myself. Don't touch my tree. Just tell me how to do it. And in that sense, I think that's not necessarily a bad thing because I don't want people to take knowledge for granted. And that's actually more meaningful if they understand why the work is being done. And then they appreciate the work greater, right, when they understand it. And so in terms of education, and I guess it's like also me trying to write my blog and articles. There's not that many, like maybe I write 4 a year now or something. But always thinking of like how do people understand things where bonsai is just very unique in that, right? It's this combination of horticulture, art, but there's still some craft and technique, right? Which pertains to how do we direct the growth in the way we want? How do we build branching and develop the tree? Because bonsai is not really something we achieve in one iteration, right? The tree's always growing. And so the education kind of always thinking about, I guess, from the tree's perspective, because the tree doesn't care about your aesthetic, right? It just wants the path of least resistance to grow, acquire sun and whatever. And so that's kind of like a perspective, a difference in perspective when you think of education. And then especially when people are starting out, I think that's the most valuable, trying to teach them, I guess, these kind of like core values of bonsai and maybe some of the basic philosophy, because that stuff is like will influence how then you practice bonsai in the future. And so the education can go pretty far and it can get pretty deep, but it's definitely valuable in terms of like how you share knowledge and people's understanding of that, right? It can raise the level of bonsai in the community. Yeah, so that was a pretty broad answer. I don't really know like
that's good.
exactly what to talk about. Yeah.
That's okay. Yeah, I can see you're thinking about this on a deep level in terms of, planning your articles or your lectures and like what might be the most useful for someone.
Mhm.
And just as a side curiosity, is there any bonsai books that you're planning to read this winter?
I was just gonna ask, yeah, question for all of you. How do we all find our education in horticulture?
Yeah, so like when I was just like a pure hobbyist and like before I went to Japan, like I was like extremely obsessed where it's just like it's like every day I have to like all my free time is dedicated towards learning about bonsai, which is just anything I can get, right? Random magazines, books, online. And so it's just kind of it was like an obsession at that point. Just anytime I had free time, okay, I need to learn something in a bonsai. In reality, there's just so much information out there right now, and a lot of it's overlapping that you can get like pretty comparable quality knowledge from different sources. And so I don't want to say there's like a right or wrong way, or you need to read certain books. I mean, it should just be enjoyable, find the stuff you like, but then understand like, oh, why did this guy in this book say this thing, right? Or why did he apply this technique like that? And then I think once you get that, you can start to like extrapolate and then basically kind of infer on your own. Because there's so much like information there now that it's it's hard to say, like to say, oh, only learn from this one source. Like I can't almost, for me, I can't even recommend that, right? It's pretty hard.
Yeah, and it could be.
It's really intrinsic too, right? I mean, you have to do it through experience.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm in school for horticulture right now, and I'm trying to extrapolate all this information I'm getting by going to school. It's like, but how do I relate it to a pot tree? You know, not agronomically.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was just gonna say it could also be that you know, many sources overlap, many books may say some of the same ideas, but it's like the more that you read it and maybe someone explains it in a different way and then it clicks for the reader a little bit better, or maybe it's the repetition and you kind of get a stronger foundation of all of these core principles. But yeah, I think it's a good idea, like you're saying, looking across all of these different sources of information, what's the core principle that can be more widely guiding you in all different cases, you know? Did anyone else have any ideas for what people could do over winter in this category?
I think
I had-
we.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I think we covered like a good amount.
Yeah,
Add
yeah.
nothing specific.
The last idea I had on this area was I started making like Instagram reels and little TikToks just recently. So I have all these photos from old tree work and I've put them towards that. And someone from the Pacific Bonsai Museum, his Instagram handle is Bifurcation Bonsai, and he commented saying that
Brock Averson. Yeah.
Brock.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he commented saying that he wishes he had time to organize his photos. And I was like, no, I did not organize my photos. They were an absolute mess. But that would be a good thing to do in winter. So especially like in your case, Julian, writing articles and putting information out in the world. If you have a good system of organization, it's a lot of time to invest, but it could make it easier when you are writing those articles.
Yeah, you definitely like, I mean, that's 100% true. And kind of like the way when I write articles, it's like so messy and disorganized. I just like have an idea in my head and then I just immediately start writing it. And then like my photo album is just like not organized in separate photos. It's just like one folder of all the photos mixed together. And I'm like, oh, this photo's in here somewhere. I'll just scroll through and find it. And that's definitely something I can do.
Yeah, when I write articles for work or like I'm doing experiments for work or back when I used to write articles for Bonsai more often, I always just this whole process makes me think how disorganized it is to be creating because you just accumulate more and more photos.
Yeah.
But it stays disorganized until you package it up as a finished product and be like, okay, there, all of those thoughts and pictures are organized for that one thing. Everything else can go to hell, but that one thing you've organized for somebody. Okay, so now we've kind of covered a lot of what people can do with their bonsai in winter. So that's probably, maybe we'll cut that into one episode. Today's episode was recorded, edited, and produced by Ryan Houston, Kevin Ferris, and Kelly Louie. To find out more and see pictures relevant to today's topic or sponsors, see the show notes linked in the description or at bonsaitimepodcast.com. To submit questions, suggestions, or tree pictures for future discussion, find the contact form also on our website or message us directly at bonsaitimepodcast@gmail.com. If you would like to support us in making more episodes, consider rating us, sharing with friends, donating, or becoming a sponsor. Our music was provided by MIDI Cancer. To find more of their work, check out their SoundCloud and Bandcamp pages. To stay in touch with us, subscribe to us in your podcast app or find us on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook at Bonsai Time Podcast or on TikTok at Bonsai Time Pod. Also, Kevin and Kelly are at Kevin_FerrisPNW and Bonsai with Kelly, respectively, on Instagram. And Ryan is invivobonsai.com and on all social media. Remember, have fun and bonsai on.